Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And have you completely forgotten his word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son? It says, "My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed."
Thanks, Andy. Hopefully you haven't had a chance to close your Bibles, so they're still open in front of you. Hebrews chapter 12. As I alluded to before, Monday was my first day back at work after 2 weeks off. Ruth, Martha and I went down to Lymington on the south coast and had a fantastic time, but it did what has happened in most holidays over the past 10, maybe 15 years, in that I come back, and if not twice the man that I was when I left, certainly 1.5 times the man that I was when I left. You see, it's just so easy, whether I'm engrossed in a good book, whether I'm once again being disappointed by England football team, it's just so easy just to snack, just to keep on going, keep those going. I've got the old unhealthy drink next to me, that comes in as well, nice bit of Dr. Pepper, and it just all adds up. And it means that when you come back, you don't need a belt quite as much as you did when you left. I really felt it on Tuesday when I went out for a run. Now, I'm no Mo Farah at the best of times, but this was hard. I kind of came out of the house and set off and was like, oh, this is not going to go well. And kind of ran and then stopped a bit and then ran again and thought, I'm running past a church member's house, I'm going to run fast at this point. And just wanted to keep on going, and eventually made it back round again, waited a bit outside so that Ruth had thought I'd gone further than I actually had, and then came back in and delightfully fell into the shower. Martha actually commented when I picked her up, "You're very sweaty, Daddy." See, the problem is that I was carrying too much. There's too much weight on the go for me to be able to do what I was able to. I'm not in shape. I'm not in shape to go running, maybe in a way that I could, certainly as I could 20 years ago, but even as I could even just a month ago. I haven't been disciplined. That's been the problem. These last 2 weeks, I haven't done much exercise. I've done a lot of eating, a lot of unhealthiness, and so I'm not in shape to carry on running. And so actually, I'm not very motivated. The second time this week when I got up to go for a run, I was like, oh, my bed's really comfy. I could just stick my ears in and listen to something. Shall I go? Yeah. And I kind of forced myself out, and off I went. And I didn't do any better than I did the first time. The book of Hebrews has a recurring picture of life as a journey, as a race, as a run. And as it's a long one, there's a danger that we won't finish. There's a danger that we will be distracted, that we'll be drawn off course. either in some kind of cataclysmic moment that just takes us off, or in drift, as we just set out in the wrong direction and end up completely off course. We've seen the warnings, haven't we? Hebrews is massively strong. There are warnings that cause us to question even if we belong to Christ himself. But they're there to shock us into reality, to catch us in that drift, to keep us literally on the straight and narrow, so that we may follow the Christ who has saved us. There's a danger that we take a wrong turning without realizing or deliberately, and we end up far from where we were supposed to be. See, this book reminds us that a life of faith is hard. We prefer tangible, controllable things. We get up in the morning, we write a to-do list, we get to the end and we've done it. That is a good day. We can cope with those kind of days. Yet giving control to Jesus is always better and always worth it because of who he is. We've seen this big headline from Mr. Hebrews. You move forward in Jesus because Jesus is better. Whatever you compare with him is inferior because Jesus is better. And the point of our passage here is there at the end in verses 12 and 13. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. This is race language, with verse 12 giving us a picture of somebody who is ready to drop out. The knees are hurting, the arms are weak, they're feeling feeble. It's a whole lot easier just to sit down on the side of the road, just to move off in a different direction, because this race is hard and it's easier to give up. We need strength. And verse 13 shows us that we need a level path, a consistent and navigable path, so that we won't fall away. That word translated disabled in verse 13 is better translated dislocated, meaning that one is struggling with the danger of being located somewhere other than they should be, out of the community, and most starkly, out of Christ. The language of the New Testament is geographical. We as Christians are in Christ. So to be dislocated is to be away from him. And so the big question is, are we in shape to keep running? Are we in shape to make it to the end of this race? In the way that we live, in the way that we relate to the Lord, is all of that helping us to run, or is it actually holding us back and potentially preventing us from finishing the race? Think ahead to this week. As you look into this week, there are things that you're pretty sure are going to happen. They happen every week. It's just what life is like. And you're ready for some things that might pop up that aren't expected, but you're pretty sure you can deal with them. But what if this was the week where something happened that had the potential to change your life forever? What if that thing that you fear the most happening happens this week? And you may think that I'm being ever so slightly dramatic, and yet for some people in our church, that was last week. Are you prepared for that moment? Some of you think back and you can think, yes, that was the moment in my life when the very worst happened. We don't know what life will be like this time next week. But are we ready? Are we ready for that? And so we need to get in shape. We need to be in shape so that whatever the obstacles are, whatever our path looks like, we can keep going. We can run with perseverance. And of course, when we see the athletes in a few weeks performing at the Olympics, when we see the 100 meters being run in under 10 seconds, when we see a marathon being running sub 2 hours 20, what we don't see are the countless hours that have gone before. All right, YouTube now gives us insights into running diaries and all that kind of stuff, but generally, we don't see the hard work. We see these moments when the athletes in prime condition stand on the track and perform to the utmost. See, for us, what we're doing right now is like training camp, where we come together, where we work out together so that we can confront this week together in the Lord's strength. When we spend time on our own with the Lord, it is our spiritual discipline. Just as this week I thought, shall I go out? Shall I go for a run? Shall I stay in bed? That's what happens every day when it comes to our time before the Lord. Shall I do this? Well, I've got this going on. It's easier just to do that. These are our spiritual disciplines. The Lord uses it to get us in shape. So whatever the path looks like in our race, we can keep going. We want to keep going. The reason we're here, I can't imagine why anybody else isn't here tonight, but the reason that we're here is that because we want to keep going. That the desire is there, but so often the weakness is there as well. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. And we need to submit both of those to the Lord. Submit our desire to him. Lord, I want this, please. And we submit our weakness to him. Lord, I'm so weak. If it's not for you, then I'm just going to drop out. And so we need to submit those to him as we consider just two things. We consider our trailblazer's race, and we understand our trainer's methods. So first, we're going to consider our trailblazer's race. A couple of weeks ago, Craig took us through Hebrews 11, that chapter, that faith hall of fame, packed through with all the Old Testament heroes that the guys in the first century would have had on their wall, or the star posters. Incredible things done through faith in a majestic God. These guys are heroes. Yet they're ordinary people who took God at his words. Were innately Abraham better than me? No. Moses better than me? No. But God did extraordinary things through these people who were given such faith to be able to respond in ways that I don't. And as chapter 12 begins, they remain in focus. Verse 1, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, these men and women, some named, some anonymous, from chapter 11, are like this great crowd. But it's not like they're watching us. You could get the idea that we're in the stadium running around and they're the crowd cheering us on. Rather, that they're witnesses to the faithfulness of a gracious God. Every time we look at one of these names, every time we read something, every time it sends us back to the Old Testament to see the story, we are spurred on because we see that God is faithful, that he acts in grace towards his people. As Craig said, faith is trusting God and then doing. Hebrews 11 is full of action. They did this, they did this, they thought about this, they walked here, they underwent this, they did this. But all of it finding its basis in faith in the promise-keeping God. See, whatever we're called to do, this cloud of witnesses is evidence that it is possible because of the God who calls us to do it. And what is that calling? Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And the picture here is the athletic arena. I don't know how much of the Olympics that you will watch, but because of advances in technology, we get to see so much more than we did years ago. And one of the things that I love seeing are just in those moments, particularly before the shorter sprints, 100, 200, 400 meter races, the cameras go into the ready room, the place where the athletes are before they come out. And it's a real, psychologists have an absolute dream in there as some people strut about, others just sit there with their heads down. But what's interesting is that none of the athletes are ready to run. They're wearing a tracksuit. They're fully dressed up. Often many of them got a bag on their back with things that they would need as they go out, maybe tape, maybe extra shoelaces, whatever. Often they've got massive headphones over them so they can ignore the guys over there, just block out everything and just focus upon themselves, and they're going on the bee of the bang. Getting excited already. But by the time they crouch down on the start line, it's all gone. It's all gone. Everything that would get in the way of them going and keeping going is gone. It's them, their spikes, their kit, and off they go. All of those other things, they make running harder. And so they've got to go. See, for Christians, as we race, we're called to throw off what hinders, literally a weight or a bulk. And Mr. Hebrew says everything. So he's probably not got anything specific in mind. But we can kind of read into that and think about those things that weigh us down, that cause bulk on our back. And it's those things that slow us down. Those things can prevent us from moving forward in Christ. It's a love of money. It's an attachment to the world. It's a preoccupation with earthly matters, forgetting that we're citizens of heaven. It's an overinflated view of ourselves, that it's about me and what I do. They're all examples of bulks that need throwing off and tossing away so that we can run with perseverance the race marked out for us. And that's then followed by sin that entangles. Such an evocative word, isn't it? Entangles. But that word also, it speaks of a distraction that draws you off target. It wraps itself around you and then begins to pull. And there's also an element in the original word that talks about that it's preying on you. It's like those horror movies where trees or plants kind of become real and move their way out, and they're looking for you and wrap themselves around you and then grab you away. It's the octopus and the squid in those horror movies that pull you. There's a sense in which it is trying to distract you. It is trying to get you bogged down. It's preying on you. There is a race to be won that constantly requires a throwing off of everything that will get in the way, anything that will hold us back or distract us so that we can persevere to the end. I wonder what it is for you. What is it that you need to throw off at this moment? And the thing is, it's hard. It's really hard. Life weighs us down. Sin pulls us off course. It is a battle that we will never get to the end of this side of glory. It is a daily battle, a daily challenge. And there are times when it feels like it'd be easier just to stop. I don't want to battle anymore. I don't want to go through this hard work anymore. If I wasn't a Christian, I wouldn't feel guilty about the things that I do. My friends do the same thing and they don't feel guilty. If I wasn't a Christian, I wouldn't feel guilty. If I wasn't a Christian, work would be a whole lot easier during Pride Month. It'd be a whole lot easier just to be able to stick the lanyard on, say, isn't this great, and get on with things. That would be so much easier if I wasn't a Christian. If I wasn't a Christian, I wouldn't have to be a pastor. There wouldn't be that calling. I could just get a different job that didn't weigh us down in the same way. I wonder how you would end that sentence. Life would be so much easier if I wasn't a Christian, because I doubt there's ever been a Christian who hasn't had that thought. Who hasn't thought life would just be so much easier. But there is a wonderful remedy for the soul in those moments. Verse 2, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. You see, that's how we run. That's how we keep going. That's how we will make it to the end. We see Jesus. Again, the way that it's written in the original, the looking is the dominant action within the running. How does the running happen? Well, it's through the looking. The fixing of our eyes upon Jesus enables the running. It's not that we start running and then we kind of, oh, where's Jesus? Oh, there he is. Okay, I'll run. No. It's we fix our eyes on Jesus and we run. There's no cursory glance. There's no first look and done. It's not like, okay, I know where it is, so I can kind of make my own way there. No. This is a constant, unwavering, delighted, fixing our eyes upon Jesus, the pioneer and the perfecter of our faith. See, we've seen the Hall of Fame in chapter 11, every one of them there to encourage us and to spur us on. But when it comes to a life of faith, here is the first, here is the best, here is the one who should fill our view. When I was little, my dad was teaching me how to ride a bike. I'd gone through the stabilizers phase and was fine with that. And Dad took me down to the park, and for the first time, he took off the stabilizers on my bike. And he did the usual thing where I started pedaling, and he had his hand on the back of my saddle, and then he let go. And the older of you amongst us will remember the TV show Ever Decreasing Circles. Well, that's what happened to my bike riding. I'd start wavering, and I'd go in a circle, get smaller, until I'd just fall off and graze my knee. Dad would pick me up, put me back on, set me going again, let go, and I'd just go round and round and round and splat on the floor. This was in a public park, and a guy came over, and he spoke to my dad, and he said, I've seen what's happened. Try not to laugh. But you see that tree over there? Yeah. When you let go of your son's saddle, get him to look at that tree over there. Because he'd noticed that as I started going, basically my head was focused on the front wheel. And as I was doing that, I just was going round and round and round and round and round and round and falling over. Dad said that to me, set me off, let go, and I rode my bike. Straight into the tree. No, I didn't. I had that clear goal ahead of me, and I did it. That was what I needed. I needed to have my head lifted up, and then I went. And I was never going to get it on my own. I don't know how old I was. I wasn't going to get it. I needed someone to come and to lift that up so that I could see. You see, Jesus is our pioneer. He is our perfecter because he has walked the path before. He is the one who knows how to do it. He is the one who has done it. And so he gives us that glorious vision. He's blazed the trail for us. Marked out for us in verse 1 is the same in the Greek as set before him in verse 2. Perseverance in verse 1 is the same word as endurance in verse 2. Jesus had a race to run and he persevered because he fixed his eyes in the right place. It was for the joy set before him. So he prayed to his Father in John 17. He said these words, "And now, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory I had with you before the world began." We cannot possibly imagine what it was like for Jesus as he looked forward to the cross. We can't see him in Gethsemane and think, I've been really sad about things and I've been really weighed down by it, so I know how Jesus... No, we don't. But also, we don't see this as well. For the joy that was set before him, for the glory with his Father that he had before he came, the glory of God seen through the salvation of the lost was his joy. That's why he came. A bride won for eternity through his atoning sacrifice, an eternal inheritance. That was his joy. And so he went through a weight, he went through an entanglement that you and I can't possibly understand. As I sat in my office this week, feeling the weight of not being the pastor that I should be, as you agonize over the sin that has caught you again and again, as we battle with the ungodly messages that our culture wants to give to us every day, it is the tiniest drop in the ocean compared to all that Christ endured. Yet he went to the cross, scorning its shame, thinking little of its shame. Everything that it would bring upon him, he counted it as nothing. He endured to the end because of the glory that was to come as he sat down at the right hand of God. Brothers and sisters, he has made that journey. He has gone through the race, and a more difficult and a more challenging, infinitely more than ours. But because he has blazed the trail, we can trust him that he will bring us to the end. It's a repeated phrase in this series because it's a repeated idea in Hebrews, because it's true. We feel like giving up when our eyes are not fixed on Jesus. So therefore, verse 3, consider him who endured such opposition from sinners so that you will not grow weary and lose hearts. Begins with consider. Consider fully. Look at it from every angle. Give steadfast attention to the Lord Jesus. Spend time with him. Meditate upon him. Read about him. Pray to him and with him. And see how he endured, how he ran his race to the end. You see, he is the antidote to weariness. He is the antidote to losing heart. He is our first and our best when it comes to faith. He fixed his eyes on the joy before him, and so should we. And what is that? Look with me at the end of verse 10. But God disciplines us for our goods, in order that we may share in his holiness. Share in his holiness. It's great having Pete here with us tonight. Years ago at a pastor's get-together, Pete did a thing from Leviticus on the holiness of God. And it was mind-blowing just to grasp something, the merest glimpse of how holy our God is and how much Jesus had to do to be able to unite a holy God with sinful people. If you told a Jew in the time that Leviticus was written that we could share in God's holiness, that is remarkable. That is mind-blowing, and yet that is our joy. That is the truth, that we share in God's holiness. Hebrews has these, the whole New Testament has these things dotted through that are true about us because of the gospel. Do you long for that? Do you long to share in God's holiness? In the midst of an election campaign when no one nationally is speaking of Christ, when no one seems to consider God, don't you long for a share in the holiness of God? In your battle against sin, in that daily fight against those things that continue bring you down, don't you long for a share in God's holiness? to know the end of the race, to know the victory parade, to know the end of weariness and weakness. Come, Lord Jesus. That should be our prayer. Come, Lord Jesus. And once again, as with everything in Hebrews, this is corporate. In verses 1 to 3, it says we, us, our. The your is plural. This is a team race. And we encourage one another to consider the trailblazers' race. Look at this thing that I saw from Jesus this week. Look at this moment where he worked in my life. Look at this that I've just seen from the Gospels about how he did this. Let's spur one another on. This is a team race. And let's push on, fixing our eyes on him together. We consider Christ. With Jesus in full view, we run. And then as we come to the rest of our passage, it helps us to understand something of the Lord's method in how he does that. How are we enabled to keep our eyes fixed upon Jesus? How are we enabled to throw off everything that gets in the way of that run? The theme of this section, it's dead easy to see. Almost every verse, and sometimes multiplying, it talks about discipline. It's a word that brings out various thoughts, not all of them positive. But look at the glorious goal. Verse 11, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. You want to abound in righteousness. You want to overflow with abundant peace. It comes through discipline. It comes through training. See, it's another goal that's put before us that we should crave, but it's not an easy path. The first part of the verse suggests that it's not an easy path. And that word translated trained is the Greek word from where we get our word gymnasium. It's like we're going to the gym. God puts us through our paces. We're being trained into shape, and it's not going to be easy. So let's get the big picture, verse 4. In your struggle against sin, you've not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And have you completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son? It says, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you. Because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. See, Mr. Hebrews, he wants to relate the opposition from sinners that Christ received in verse 3 to his readers to remind them that wherever they are, Christ has been there already. Whatever they're going through, Christ has been there. Whatever experience they have, nobody can say Christ doesn't know what it's like. He is with us all the time. But he also wants to show that there is purpose in their hardship. And he uses Proverbs explicitly in verses 5 and 6 and indirectly elsewhere to relate how God trains his people to how a father trains his son. This was written in a culture where the father's responsibility was to prepare the son for life. Education wasn't the same then. The father would take on that role. And academically and morally and vocationally, the father would prepare the son. And even though our culture is different, the principles that we're going to see still holds. And before we get into it, we need to hear verse 5. And have you completely forgotten this word of encouragement? Other translations, this word of exhortation. See, what is to come is an exhortation because it's urging us to listen. It is going to shock us out of our stupor because we need to listen, to act. But it's also an encouragement because this is framed in the context of a father-son relationship. And whatever your experience with your father or as a father, it is to draw our eyes to the perfect Father and to see him in action. As you listen to and understand this section, it should do your heart good. So if it doesn't, I'm sorry, that's my fault, not the text. I mean, it might be yours, but it's probably mine. See, the hardship talked about here is persecution for faith. But the principle, I believe, can be applied across suffering in general. Where is the Lord when hardship comes? He is on his throne, reigning as the sovereign king. Verse 5, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. The discipline is the Lord's. He's not the author or the committer of sin, yet he is sovereign over the sinner and has different purposes in mind from them. What they intended for harm, God intended for good. His purpose is to grow righteousness, to multiply peace, and he will use whatever means he deems fit to do so. Very often it's not the way that we would choose. Lord, couldn't you have taught me this in a different way? And yet we trust him that he knows what he's doing, even if it's not enjoyable. The word chastens in verse 6 is the same word that is used to describe the floggings that Christ endured before his crucifixion. That's a stark phrase, isn't it? That we would see our God looking at us like that. It is to be endured, verse 7. It isn't pleasant, verse 11, but it is under his control and direction, verse 7. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. See, the writer relates it to human parenting. He's helping us to understand what God does by relating it to human parenting, and it helps us to land it because we can see it from both sides. We can kind of focus on human parenting, and then we can see it from God's point of view and get a more rounded picture of what it is that's going on. I want to spend just a bit of time looking at human side before looking at it from God's side. Fathers, what is the primary purpose of your parenting? It's to show your children what God is like. Now, with all of the caveats around us being sinful and unwise and mistake makers, we are to show them the Father. You see, we as fathers, future fathers, past fathers, whatever, we cannot help the fact that the moment our children open the Bible and see the word Father, they will think of us. That's their frame of reference, because we are the only Father they've got. So what view of God are you giving them? What are they thinking of when they see Father? Does your discipline and your training give a rounded view of what God is like? I came home from work one day this week, and Ruth had a tough afternoon with Martha. I realized with the cute pigtails and the big smile, you think that never happens, but it does. For those of you who don't know, my daughter is 3, and it's an absolute joy, but not on that afternoon. She'd been obstinate, she'd been stubborn, she'd run away from Ruth, and it had culminated in her hitting Ruth. Now, as Ruth told me this story, what should my reaction be? What should I say to Martha? Does she need to know that there is nothing that she can do that can make me love her any more or love her any less? Does she need to know that there is nothing in all of creation other than death that will prevent her from being my daughter? Yes, and she needs to know that I'm righteously angry with her behavior. And so she was educated that I was angry. Parents, but particularly dads, do your children know that you are angry at their sin? Do you put them in situations that they don't like, that make them feel bad because they reject the good gift that you are, God's gift to them as your parents? Because in them, you're showing how God works. There is no one else in this world that I would rather make Martha cry than me. If anybody in this world makes Martha cry other than me, they've got me to answer for. But if Martha is going to cry, I want it to be from me. Because I know that the tears and the pain that she feels temporarily come from a place of unconditional love and a desire for her to know God and to live for Jesus. The only person, other than Ruth, that I want to make Martha cry is me. because I love her and I only want what is best for her. Now, I'm fallible. I'm human. I'll get it wrong. I will repent and I will apologize. But in that moment, I'm giving her a glimpse of what God is like, that he takes us through difficult times, that he causes us to endure hardship, but we can trust him because of who he is and because of the way that he looks at her. And so I tell her about him, and I try to show her, loving her unconditionally, training her for life, disciplining the one that I love, because that's what our Father does for us. When you suffer, when you go through the most desperate times, when you have to endure opposition from sinful people, who do you want to be sovereign over it? Do you want them to be sovereign over it? Do you want inanimate circumstance to be in control? Do you want Satan to be in control? No. I want it directed and overseen and controlled by my Father in heaven, who loves me so much that he sent his one and only Son to die for me. His goal is that I share in his holiness. And when I have my eyes fixed on Jesus, I can honestly say, God, I want to be holy, do whatever it takes. So often I can't say that, because my eyes are taken away from Jesus. He loves me. He accepts me through my union with his spotless Son. And so verse 10, they disciplined us for a little while as they thought best. But God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness. If you are in a time of weeping, if you are a time of trial, there is comfort in knowing that your tears come from your Father. There are depths there. We need to think that through. We need to do it with our eyes fixed upon Jesus. But I want nobody else in charge of my tears than my Father. Because I know, even when I can't see it, even when I don't understand, that he's doing it for my good. And I rejoice. I can rest in that, because I know that he is good. Whatever you're going through, whatever you have to face this week, God is in control, and his purposes are for your good. Let me tell you, that is easy to say, easy to write, so hard to believe. So hard to believe. But to press on in the race, we need to understand our trainer. We need to understand how he works. We need to talk to our brothers and sisters, those who've gone through the valley of the shadow of death and have come out the other side, praising Jesus. Strength for today, bright hope for tomorrow. What did that look like in your life? Tell me, encourage me, prepare me because of what might be ahead for me. Our Father works us hard. He grows our faith muscles through pain, and he harvests righteousness through grief. But look at who he is. Look at who he is. He's the one who did not spare his own Son, but gave him up for us all. If I say to God, God, I want to be holy, do whatever it takes, he says, okay, here's Jesus. That's what it takes. And if he sacrifices his Son, I can trust him with chopping off every, and there's a lot, rough edge that I have. The Apostle Peter, he got it, and he expressed it like this: dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed. Fiery ordeal, rejoicing. Peter draws a straight line between the two. Because of Jesus. We are united to him. We are sharing in his sufferings. And what was Jesus' life? Suffering first and glory to come. We plummet into those sufferings and we're lifted up into the glory. See, knowing the end, it shapes how we live now. Knowing that this is true, that glory is to be revealed, it shapes how we go in every moment. In those moments when one step in front of the other seems like impossible, when darkness closes in, we lift our eyes, we see Jesus. We come together and we press on. And that's the key to endurance. At the end, it's the revealing of the glory of Christ, and so we fix our eyes upon him. Again, it's where we need each other. Verse 13, make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, dislocated, but rather healed. See, a lack of understanding can lead to dislocation, a removal of others from the covenant community. We need to sit with sufferers. We need to weep, not trying to explain it all away, but humbly and prayerfully lifting eyes to Jesus. I've learnt that the hard way. I've talked too much and listened too little. I've come with my 3-step way to solve a problem, and it's a 3-step way to get kicked out of someone's house. We weep with those who weep. We mourn with those who mourn. We rejoice with those who rejoice. And we fix our eyes on Jesus. Are you in shape for what this week, for what this month, for what your life has in store for you? No, you're not. You're in the kind of shape that I was when I got out for a run this week. But let me tell you, you're in good hands. As you turn up at the gym to be trained again, your trainer welcomes you with open arms and says, this session's going to be hard, but let me tell you, the way you're going to be when I've finished with you, you will not recognize. You will look in the mirror and you'll think you're looking at an angel. Because I've worked on you what is good and what is pleasing. Fix your eyes on the one who has run before you, on the one who burst through the finishing line and now reigns sitting on the podium on high in the primary place, and trust the one who oversees it all. You are his. He is yours. And he will make sure that you make it to the end.